Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of Where's My Masculinity. We have a great show lined up, great conversation. So before we get into it, I would like my guests to introduce themselves. As you can see, we've got a panel today. Without further ado, I will hand the mic and they will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Lynette.
Hi, Lynette. Hi, everyone. I'm Sashai.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly.
Hello, Ntombi Temba.
Perfect. So there's a lot I'd like to discuss with you guys in this session. So I will start with the first question, being from a masculinity standpoint, do you believe, from what you've seen in your lived experiences in your interaction with masculinity, are independent, strong women such as yourselves considered a threat to masculinity? Yes or no, and why?
From my side, unfortunately, yes. And I think it's the why, it differs, but I think predominantly is based on the fact that either the way the males have been raised and what they've been taught to think or know, and you don't expect women like me, myself, or I guess us. And that's a threat to what they know or what they're used to, what they're comfortable, what they've been taught.
I agree with Lynn. And for me, I would also say yes. When I think of different contexts, when I think of home, church, school, sports, because I played sports for a big part of my life, when you come across as confident and you know yourself, you like yourself, it's almost like people don't know where the weakness is that they can exploit to get what they want out of you. So in a way, I find that people who themselves are not confident in who they are as a man, they hide in a group or they hide behind whatever stereotypes they were brought up with. It makes me think that, yes, someone like me could be a threat to what is perceived as masculinity in the spaces that I've mentioned. Yeah.
Thank you. So with me, it's yes and no, because I'll say yes because, for example, I'm raising a daughter on my own, and I'm trying to instill in her that it's okay to be independent, it's okay to be educated. You don't have to sit and wait for someone to come and do everything for you. So in that, it's a threat. And then no, because I tend to, maybe it's a weakness, I don't know, but I tend to step back. And if someone feels masculine, I allow them to be masculine.
As I take a sip before I respond. For me, it's an unequivocal yes. And the reason being, I was raised by matriarchs. I only know matriarchy. The term patriarchy only became a thing much later on in my life. I have known no other way but to be an independent and strong woman. However, they also did teach me to be very respectful, not just of men, but of people in general, regardless of race, color, or creed, and age. So that is generally how I've always conducted myself. But what I've often found in my interaction with the masculine gender is there tends to be an element of holding back, or sometimes a necessity to break you down because you are the way that you are. The one time I was actually told by one of my very close guy friends, you need to tone it down, don't be, or you're going to die alone. And I'm like, what's that supposed to mean? He just couldn't qualify it further. So for me, things like, and then when you personalize it. So for me, I was thinking, what's my independence or my comfort in being a woman got to do? And I mean, to Kelly's point, we also do respect, and we do know when it's time to submit, but he has to be worthy of it. I'm not just going to submit to you because you should be submit. No. You must be worthy of it, and you have to earn it. But respect as well goes a very long way. Whether I'm independent or whatever, we are who we are. But for me, it's because of my background and my upbringing.
What I find interesting is both yourself and Sasha touched on something that to me speaks to masculinity maybe being threatened by the fact that there's a lack of control that they can exert on you as individuals. Would you agree with that statement? And where do you think that need for masculinity to be in control comes from? If ultimately the masculinity that we're talking about comes from the same homes, in your case, fine, it was a matriarchal home, but the same values of respecting people and stuff would still be true, right? Regardless.
You want to start this up?
How with me?
Do you want me to go first? So you mentioned the word control, and a little bit of background. I read a lot, and all sorts of genres. I've read a book which took me down the rabbit hole of where marriage comes from and how it was instituted. And the sense of control is strongly embedded in marriage, from, the archaic thought of you're a woman, you're your father's property, and then you get passed on to be your husband's property. There's a lot of control there. And then government got involved in the process of marriage, and there's a sense of control there. You lose your name, you take your husband's name, because you need to be taken care of, which I think is a form of control. There's a sense of there's this thing in society that is abiding. It's a bias that's been there for a while, and the only way I can express it is that women need to be taken care of. But under that guise, there is a sense of telling them what to do, what to think, how to dress, because the society perceives us as weak or can't think for themselves, very emotional. But you find that society created this thing where now we need to live by these rules. So going back to the sense of control, I think it's a construct that has been brought about by what we call culture today, what we call marriage today, and just the whole divide of this is how females should behave, this is how males should behave, and this is how we can interact with each other. It's a construct that doesn't serve anybody. So, yeah, I can speak more on it later, but maybe Ntombi wants to add on to that.
The mere fact that she said property.
Right.
She referred to women as property,
Right.
an item, a commodity that's passed on from one person to another is already a problem for me.
Right.
Why are we not referring to men as property?
Gotcha. Okay. Do you want to add something on that?
Yes, but I would like to deviate again to the point I made earlier, that when I alluded to submission. So the way it is communicated in society can build a certain level of resistance. But in how I have grown and come to understand, and this is why I emphasize on the point that you've got to be worthy of it. A title can deem that as your subordinate, I must submit to you. But are you worthy of it, and have you earned it? So in every job I've worked, I have reported both to men and women, very different experiences. And I will give you. I will submit to you, and I will give you your respect until you get to a point where you lose it or you compromise it. Then now you must work. So as almost like as an immediate, that's what I will award to you. And then you spend the rest of our relationship either confirming or taking it away from yourself. But even if the submission versus the respect, I will always award respect, because when I think about it, I'm representing my grandmother. In our culture, they'll say, "Oh, umzukulu kaMamdladla," which means Mamdladla's granddaughter. Mamdladla is my grandmother. So I understand that when I'm out there, I'm representing my family. If I ever have to display any form of chacharachness, if I'm disrespectful, they will still refer to my grandmother. So I must think about it. That's me, and I own it. But it comes from where I come from. So I always try and project that persona, and I'm conscious of it, because a lot of the times in certain scenarios we find ourselves, the opposite will be true. So yeah, I mean those are the two premises for me, and I do genuinely believe like respect is earned, but for you to maintain it, you must continue to earn it. I will give it to you gladly. Lose it, you work your way back to earn it.
No.
You sort of preempted the next part of what I wanted to talk about when it comes to that dynamic. So it's interesting that you mentioned patriarchy in your earlier statement, and then you also mentioned the workplace. What I'm also interested to know is the construct of masculinity that we have today, right? Obviously, because it's patriarchal, and how we see that working out in organizations in the workspace. What is your experience around that in terms of the clear distinctions you'd see between yourself and your male peers in terms of the basic maybe expectations or the way that you're treated in the workplace?
So from my side, and I think for most of us, in terms of our experiences either in the corporate world or any environment you're in, it's predominantly a male-dominated environment. And the higher up you go, the more male it gets. So effectively, and you hear terms thrown out like it's the norm, it's the boys' club, you know? It's the top is always male heavy, and if there is like the one odd female, it is one odd female who is trying to pave the way, or hopefully pave the way for the rest of us to make it. And it's unfortunate that you have to work almost twice as hard to be seen or be recognized, because I'm not sitting there going, hey, what's up? You know, are you playing golf this weekend? You know? And I don't want to be that, because that's not me. You know, that's not what I'm about. But unfortunately, you find yourself in this environment, and it's sad because you have to work twice as hard because you're not buddy my chum. And there's in that like male camaraderie that's happening. So for you to be seen, you're like busting your ass. Sorry for the term, but essentially it's like you work twice as hard or 3 times as hard just for you to achieve the same things as a man, which is just sad.
And be paid something close to what they get paid. Don't forget the pay gap. It's a thing. It's a real thing. How it plays out in the workplace. So there are preconceived notions of who takes care of what in a male-female relationship. It extends into the workplace. So I'm thinking when I was a salesperson, my team was mostly male, and I was at one point the only female. And we'll have a staff meeting. For some reason, there was a quiet expectation that I'll take notes, secretary. And for some other reason, there would be a provision of refreshments. Oh, that fell on my shoulders. So you are a caretaker, but you are not quite seen as fulfilling the role that you are actually, paid to be in. And be excelling in it. It's first, oh no, but she's a female, so she'll take care of these things which we don't have to pay her for. So that seeps in, and if you don't stand up to it and say something about it, it's just going to continue. You'll be exploited. And then if you do stand up to it, that's another interesting thing, because now there's a bit of pushback, like who's going to do it? The tea lady can do it. How about you ask them? So I've seen things like that, but this was more than 10 years ago. I've been out of corporate for a long time. I come back into it. It is a little better, but only just. There's still the expectation that the one who takes note is the female. The one who reminds the team of what needs to be done is the female. There's still that caretaker role that just follows a woman wherever she goes. I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah, you can flesh it out a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with Sashia, because I've experienced a situation where you have to work 3 times as hard as a male. If the kids are sick, you are the one who has to be like, okay, I need to go look after my kids. If you fall pregnant 4 months, you're gone, and you come back, and if you still have your position, you're lucky to you still have it. Because when I fell pregnant, that was it. Came back and that growth opportunity had gone. So yes, so it really does suck. And also, if a female says something, no one listens, no one can hear. But then if a man says it, the exact same thing the female said, oh yeah, similarly to what we were saying earlier on.
Yes.
And when opportunities come and you step up and say, okay, can I have this opportunity, then they'll be like, no, it's fine. And then you see someone else being given that opportunity. So it's a disadvantage. It's a fight that we fight, and I think we win, but it is a fight. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So For me, the major thing is the sector I'm in is predominantly male, right? From classes in varsity to walking into the office on my first day. So I became accustomed to that. And I always ensured that I held my own regardless. So much so that when you're servicing a specific client, my clients were always primarily internal because I wasn't consulting outside. They would the difficult guys, head of trading, head of global markets. They're like, no, we want Ntombi, and that surprised my boss. He's like, no, but she's junior, she's a graduate. And the one time when I was having a conversation with him, he was asking me, but why does my signature say business analyst? You're a grad. I was like, no, I graduated. I'm working now. And I will put whatever I want to put. So imagine I work in this predominantly male sector. I put graduate, almost discredits me. I mean, to Lynn's point, as women, you work twice or thrice as harder for half the recognition. So if I'm going to go out there and then I disarm or disable myself further and call myself a graduate, what's going to happen? But even got to a point where now it was consistent that senior male members would always want to work with me. The senior female members didn't take so greatly to it. It affected and it impacted them. So even again to Lynn's point where she's like, if that one female who's in that male top heavy space, you hope that they'd want to elevate you. And funny enough, the expectation with the men in those roles is that woman would also want that. But in their experience, the converse is true. She wants to be known as the only woman in Exco, the only female board member, the first female this, the first black female that. That for me blows my mind, and it boggles my mind. Like, why is it that we cannot, as women, deliberately go out of our way to elevate one another? The so-called boys club becoming a girls club, there's always that unspoken tension amongst women, which still to this day perplexes me. I mean, Kelly mentioned she's raising a daughter. I'm also raising a daughter. And there's a certain something you want to instill in them, to the point where I actually took my daughter to an all-girls school because I want her to get used to and to normalize the fact that there's certain things girls can actually do for themselves. You're not necessarily looking and thinking, oh no, a boy must do that. If you have to climb the ladder to pick up the flag or to position the flag, only girls are there. So the girl is the one who's going to do it. So that it's that sort of thing that you learn, and it has to be cultivated in you from a very young age. And they like to also label and say, oh, she's aggressive. Oh, why? Just because I'm vocal and just because I can stand up for myself and vocalize. And in my experience, it's actually more come from other women. The men will commend you, but this is from my working experience. I'm not saying it's the same for everybody. In pretty much every organization, if I am considered for a different role, for a more senior role, they're looking at your remuneration. It's the men who are in there fighting for you. The role I'm in currently is all women, and for the first time, I've seen how beautiful a setup it can actually be when women fight for and stand up for other women. I would love to see so much more of that, because then we start seeing a whole lot more representation up there, and you're not looking and thinking, because mothers in Dronoi, a mother can be a CEO, a mother and a wife can be a CEO, and there's nothing that should ever take that away from you. So you have that sort of reference. You look up to that person, but there should never be a demeaning. If you happen to be that aspirational person, and whether or not, again, you want children, that doesn't define you as a woman. You are who you are.